All right. So I see quite a number of people have joined, and hopefully a few more will jump on in the coming minutes, but I'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to welcome you all to this virtual roundtable discussion. This is one in a series of 4 meetings that we have. The aim of these meetings is really to get feedback from micronutrient and large-scale food fortification data stakeholders to help prioritize the actions and activities of the DINA program that we'll be discussing. And we really do want this to be more of a roundtable format rather than a webinar. So I hope you'll all be eager to participate and give your feedback. It would really mean a lot to us and help inform the projects that we are trying to engage in. So we will share in the chat a link to a folder that has a little bit more information on everything that we're going to talk about today, including one-page summaries of the DINA project, the lexicon that we'll hear about, and the root cause analysis. So I encourage you to check those out and learn more information there. And I think those will go in the chat shortly. Yep, there we are. And I also want, DINA will be a membership organization, so we'll also add a link in the chat now for that. I'll go into that in much more detail and explain what that's all about in a few minutes, but we'll put that there now as well. And now next slide, please. Next. All right, so we'll just do an overview of the agenda. We'll spend a few minutes with introductions, introducing the team, as well as those of you on the call. And then I'll give a bit of an overview of the DINA project. And Lynn Marlang will give an overview of the lexicon that she has been working on for the project. And then Reid Atkin will give the barriers and enablers analysis presentation, followed by a hopefully longer discussion with that presentation to really uncover some of the barriers to data collection, analysis, and use for micronutrients and large-scale food fortification. So that's a bit of an overview of hopefully the next 90 minutes or so of the presentation and discussion. Next slide. Next slide. All right, so just a quick overview. My name is Megan Barasa. I am the program lead for DINA. And I'm joined here today by Reid Atkin, who is a senior advisor to the Micronutrient Forum, Lynn Marlang, who's been our consultant for the last several months working on the lexicon, and Saskia Ozendarp, our executive director, who will give an introduction to the Micronutrient Forum. And we've also been working with Sonia Hess, who is another consultant working on the project as well. And we're of course supported by a number of really wonderful colleagues at the Micronutrient Forum Secretariat, many of whom are joining the call today to hear this as well, because it's a nice time zone for some of them as well. So we're really happy and pleased that they're able to join too. Next slide. So I will pass it over to Saskia now to give a brief overview of the Micronutrient Forum.
Yes, thank you, Megan, and welcome everyone. I'm really pleased to see your interest in the Micronutrient Forum's new DINA project, Data Innovation Alliance project. I would like to give you some background on the forum. So my name is Saskia Ozendarp, and I'm the executive director of the Micronutrient Forum. And those of you who have been in the field for longer, they may know the Micronutrient Forum because since quite some time, the forum has been organizing these biannual global conferences for which it was mostly known. But since 2019, the forum also became an independent international NGO, and we call ourselves a knowledge broker, really trying to link the micronutrient evidence based on micronutrient nutrition to policymakers, research, and implementation. So we don't really implement programs, we don't do research, and we don't set policies, but we are really in that middle to try to broker the knowledge between those entities. And we do this through a couple of activities related to convenings, which is what we currently are our experiences. So we bring together stakeholders on a common smaller topic of interest, and we try to push and pursue for collective action. We have, of course, the global conference still coming up. The next one will be next year on nutrition and resilience, consultations, and we do advocacy on micronutrient nutrition on behalf of and together with our stakeholders. Next slide. So our vision and mission have not really changed. We have recently launched our new strategic plan for 2022 to 2025, which is pretty much building on the inaugural strategic plan of the Micronutrient Forum. And the vision of the Micronutrient Forum is really to envision a world where all people have optimal micronutrient status for health and well-being. And we do this by fostering alignment, consensus building, and collective action to make sure that the field as a whole is moving forward, and that the micronutrient policies and program implementers have evidence-based, comprehensive, and cost-effective guidance on how to implement these programs. Next slide. So this was what I already informed you on. We do this by by fostering a number of activities, convenings, consultations to synthesize existing knowledge, and advocacy to really facilitate coordinated action among diverse stakeholders to make sure that policies and activities are evidence-based. Next slide. Oh, I think that's all that I had to say for these 3 minutes. So I will hand over to Megan, and I'm happy to ask you any questions. And I also welcome you to visit our website if you want to have more information on our other programs and platforms that we work on, including the Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies Consortium, which is around improving maternal micronutrient nutrition, and the Standing Together for Nutrition Consortium, which is around the impact of COVID and subsequent crises on malnutrition. And I would hand it over now back to Megan. Over.
Great, thank you so much, Saskia. So now it would be nice to do a round of introductions, and I think we have a small enough group with us that for those of you who are joining us, if you're able to turn on your mic and your camera if you would like, or you can simply message us in the chat. Let us know your name, your organization, and where you're from, where you're located today. And that would be a great way to get to know you. We'll also do a short survey to also see a few questions about your roles in nutrition and data as well. So this will be on the screen now, I think. And we can also do this while we do some introductions. So if anyone would like to introduce themselves, please go ahead.
Yes, can I introduce myself?
Please.
Hopefully you're seeing me. I'm not seeing my video, but hopefully
we see you.
Me. Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Tatiana Nyazayo. I'm from Zimbabwe, based in Harare, but at the moment I'm in Kadoma. I work in the Ministry of Health and Childcare as a nutrition emergency preparedness and surveillance manager. And one of my portfolio is actually dealing with the micronutrient deficiencies in the country. So particularly I've got really an interest in this round table, so that maybe we may actually contribute towards information sharing or even collection of information pertaining to the micronutrient conditions within the country. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chair.
Excellent, thank you. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves? Don't be shy.
Yeah, hi, I'm Abe Parvanta. I'm an international kind of nutrition consultant, formerly years ago with the US CDC in Atlanta. I primarily work in advising or assisting countries with nutrition, food fortification program planning, if you will, policies and so on, as well as monitoring and surveillance of the implementation to track the effective coverage of the programs. Thank you.
Great. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves?
I will go. My name is Jackie Kongo. I work for Nutrition International as a regional advisor for research and evaluation based in Nairobi, Kenya. So in my role, I handle data in various ways. So I thought this would be an interesting meeting to attend and just kind of learn what this particular DINA is all about. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right, well, I think we also have some answers to our survey. So I'll go ahead and end the poll so we can share those results with you. And hopefully you can see the group largely involved in nutritional assessments and monitoring and evaluation. And really the types of interventions that you're all involved in is pretty well spread out across large-scale food fortification, supplementation, biofortification, dietary diversity and modification, as well as nutrition-sensitive agriculture. So it's great to have such a mix of people here. And then where you see yourself as part of the data value chain, looks like most people in collection and analysis, and then the use and interpretation. So that's really great. And I will stop sharing this. And we can move to the next slide. It's really lovely to meet all of you. And I hope we'll be able to engage you a little bit more in DINA. So I realize I also haven't said the full name of DINA. So it's the Micronutrient Data Innovation Alliance. And so this is, we can go to the next slide, a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded project that will run for the next few years. And it's really aiming to support the data ecosystem. And I'm sure none of you are unaware of some of the challenges that exist in micronutrient and large-scale food fortification data. We really feel like this ecosystem is quite immature and that it's not really functioning to its full capacity. And over the last year or so, the team at the Micronutrient Forum has really been trying to understand why and how DINA might be able to help. And this has led us here today. There are really three things that we have felt like could be improved. One is that reliable data is very sparse. It's not just necessarily about having more data, but really about having the right types of data and higher quality data that are really needed for justifying, designing, optimizing, and maintaining micronutrient and fortification programs. Another possible issue that we see quite frequently is that when available data is out there, it's not always analyzed to its full potential. And so the data landscape is often fractured and lacks some coordination. The data may be housed in a different ministry or with a different organization and may not always be shared or fully analyzed. So it would be nice to have greater communication there. And then when we do have existing analyses, it's not always used to inform national level policy and programming in the way that it could be used. So we know that there's often a limited understanding by policymakers of the importance of micronutrient deficiencies and how that data can be used to support interventions to prevent them. And this would be really useful to have to further engage and advocate for the data collection, analysis, and use in monitoring programs. So we really feel that we need to more efficiently advocate, catalyze funding, and improve the design and measurement of programs. And this really does require some collective action to see the change and hopefully improve the data and utilization of it. Next slide, please. So what we would really like to see in a more mature data ecosystem would be more accurate and timely data, the availability to interpret and analyze the data, as well as the political will to act on it. and the capacity and means to design, implement, and scale up programs. So we really would like the Alliance to help align on data priorities with the whole stakeholder community in order to be able to implement change in a coordinated way. Next slide. So the approach for DINA is really to create an alliance of very diverse members collaborating to improve the availability, quality, accessibility, and use of data across the value chain. And this is really aimed at supporting national level decision makers to help better design, implement, evaluate, and optimize programs. So I'm really glad to see so many people here who work at the national level. We're really interested in your feedback because this is where we want to create the most change and impact, and really want to ask, how can DINA be of help to you? So that's great to see. And next slide, I'll just go over a bit of what we've been up to. So this project was recently funded, as I mentioned, and I've only been with the forum for just over 6 weeks, so still quite new, and we're in the launch phase. So right now we're trying to build consensus among the stakeholders and really demonstrate value. So we're doing a lot of scaffolding work around governance and membership for the organization, as well as really trying to refine the mandate of DINA. We've brought into 2 preliminary activities that were really deemed necessary initially. And one is a consensus lexicon of terms of micronutrient and large-scale food fortification. And we know that a number of organizations have created definitions, but we're not always using the same definitions for the same terms. And so Luinmar will talk in a few minutes about the consensus lexicon that we're developing to really harmonize among these terms so that we're all sort of speaking a common language. And then we are also working on a data gap and root cause analysis that will help to inform the priorities of the DINA project, as I mentioned. And Reid will talk a little bit more about that as well. And then phase 2 will really be the implementation phase over the next couple of years to further the actions of the Alliance and really create a collaborative environment based off of our roadmap. So these early discussions are really critical for that. And next slide, please. All right, so just a little overview of the DINA governance, and then I'm going to pose some questions to you for some feedback. So one, we have opted for a membership model, and this will actually be free. So there's no charge to be a member. It's more just to engage stakeholders. There will be an organizational membership and an individual membership. I know there's often a lot of movement between organizations, so if it's easier to be an individual or perhaps an organization may not be able to join as a whole, there's that option as well. And then of course, some people, their positions don't allow them to really be full members, but we still want them to be stakeholders as well. So there's an observer status for people who aren't able to join as an official member. We're planning to put together a steering committee, which will oversee the strategic direction and annual plan. And ideally, we would really like to consist this group of a majority of people from low and middle income countries, just because this is the group we would like to work with most, and it's most important to hear from them. Based on the activities that we'll be engaging in, we'll also have some subcommittees, and these will be the active working groups. So members can opt to join a particular subcommittee of interest and participate more actively if they would like. So I would really like to get some feedback on the overall model if you have any. And the other question I have for all of you is to really ways to maintain engagement of members from LMICs. One suggestion we've had is to provide honorariums. Another one that sounds very attractive from the conversations we've had is perhaps travel support, maybe to the Micronutrient Forum conference or other ways of getting together. Seems like that would be quite valuable. And then I think I just want one more slide. Yep. So this is sort of the way we view the world. There's a number of different nutrition program activities. So as we build the committees and the steering committee especially, we'll be looking to cover all of our bases in each of these categories of program activities, from nutritional assessment, program planning, the enabling policy environments, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. And then also through different data types of activities, so collection, curation, data exchange or sharing of data, and then analysis, including modeling, and then the use of data in program policies and programs. And then if we can go back to the previous slide, I'll stop here and just ask for any comments or feedback on, DINA as a whole, if you have any questions, but also to discuss a little bit about the governance and maintaining engagement. One more specific question I have, honorariums are sometimes a tricky subject to navigate with different institutional requirements and taxation, wire transfers, things like that. Is this feasible, or would travel support be more feasible for participants in the steering committee? Any thoughts? Yeah, Lowenmar. Oh, and Abe, go ahead.
Maybe Abby first, then.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you. I just, one question I have is, as far as the membership is concerned, you didn't bring up, I don't know how, I wasn't quite clear if you have planning to have membership from representative of the food sector somehow.
Yeah, so the part of the mandate for DINA is around large-scale food fortification as well. So we would like to see some from industry as well to kind of complement the activities that we're working on and really engage all stakeholders. They also tend to have a lot of data as well that could potentially be useful if they're able to share and collaborate with others in the alliance.
Megan, my question will go for organizational membership. Will there be a limit per country for organizational membership? Because of the nature of the micronutrient programs, we will not just the health ministry or health related organizations, like Abby also mentioned that agriculture and other related sectors will also be involved. So will there be any limit per country for organizational membership? For example, from Myanmar, Nutrition Institute from Ministry of Health will also want to join as the organizational member, while Agricultural Ministry also want to join as another organizational member, but still the same from the same country. Will there be a limit for that? Thank you.
No, I don't think there will be any limits for country representation or from any organization. Of course, we want it to be balanced and not quite skewed towards any one organization. So that's something I suppose we would watch for, but I don't envision ever capping anything or declining just out of numbers. So. All right. Any other thoughts? Feel free to also add it to the chat as well. If you don't feel comfortable speaking, or you can email us as well at our email address. Yeah. I'm also trying to help Lowenmar a bit with the audio quality, just so it's a little easier to hear. We had a webinar earlier today and it sounded great, so I'm not sure what's different. And she's speaking next, so it's okay. All right, so we.
Hello, can I ask a question in terms of the criteria? If I'm looking at membership, and of course you talked about this. This is a free membership and all those that you would maybe for the steering committee, you may be looking at the majority being those from the low and medium income countries. But maybe what am I may want to know what are the criteria maybe other than those for maybe an individual or a country being part of the steering committee. Have you ever thought about what would really be the requirement of being a member of the subcommittee? What are the requirements? And of course, the part of the membership you say is just open it's just open to all countries, is it? But is there any other requirements other than what you have mentioned of being part of being a member of the alliance? Thank you.
Right. So I think that's an excellent question. We want to be very inclusive, so we won't be limiting membership at all. We will be trying to make sure that the steering committee is diverse geographically as well. So it won't hopefully favor any particular region of the world. DINA is a global organization, so we really want to make sure that we can, engage everyone. So that's one thing we'll be looking out for on the steering committee. But in terms of membership, no, it would be my very short answer. I don't know, Reid, if you want to answer that more as well.
I think I fully agree with Megan's assertion that we desire to be a global inclusive organization, but there are individuals that, there are organizations that the Micronutrient Forum declines to engage with. Munitions manufacturers, organizations involved in pornography, and we have some guidelines around dealing with breast milk substitute manufacturers. So there is some vetting process, although the intention is really to be quite inclusive. Regarding the criteria for steering committee membership, we have, if we could go back to the slide that has the taxonomy, what we have done, the next slide then, rather than seek to get specific numbers of people from different continents or countries, what we want to do is have coverage across these different program activities and inside the different data activities within those programmatic activities. So we want to make sure that we have individuals who have expertise and knowledge in assessment, program planning, the enabling environment, implementation, and monitoring evaluation. And then within those areas of expertise or experience, we seek to have geographic and gender diversity. So we've really decided to use more of a programmatic lens to identify the appropriate stakeholders or the best mix of stakeholders for the steering committee, and then apply a geographic lens amongst those with that expertise. Over.
Great, thank you so much, Reid. Any other comments or thoughts? And if we could go to the
Thank you, Megan. It's quite. I think it's quite clear. But maybe one of the other questions which I may want to ask, maybe you did not cover it in much details in terms of really what I may want to tell the terms of reference. What are the specific issues that will be the alliance be doing? Is it really providing a global guidance, or is it really going to be assisting members or member states to be engaged in the program activities that you've actually outlined here? What exactly, maybe, could we say will be the aim of this alliance? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think we will have a mix of global outputs, so such as guidance. So one of the things that we've heard is that it would be very useful to have guidance on how often we need surveys and for what purpose and how to measure things and what cutoffs, and perhaps, support in terms of what kinds of data analysis needs to be done. So that'll be kind of the global level, but then there is also a point to really work with national level stakeholders with their projects as well. So there are a number of related grants to ours as well as a number of stakeholders that we would like to engage to really work on national level problems. So that could be in the form of technical assistance, national data hubs, or even regional data hubs if there's close collaborations among countries. These are kinds of the more local level things. Training as well is something that's come up as a potential activity. So really, I see it as kind of like two pieces, one that can serve hopefully the global goods, and then one that can be very context specific to a particular location. So, although we haven't defined exactly what those activities will be yet, and that's really part of these discussions. All right.
Okay, thank you. I think it's clear.
Thank you so much. If we can go to the next slide, I'll just plug the membership once more. And we do have a website. If you go to the micronutrientforum.org, you'll find us pretty easily on the webpage as well, and you can find more information there. And so now, if we go to the next slide, I'd like to pass it over to Lewin Marling to discuss the consensus data lexicon that she has been working on.
Thanks, Megan. I think the voice now okay.
It sounds similar. Is it possible you said you're using a headset?
I'm sorry, I don't have headset, so
Oh, okay.
it's still echo.
Yes, there's like a buzzing noise, but it's okay. We'll work with it.
Yeah. I'm sorry for that because I'm just using the same computer like this morning, but I don't know why it happens.
Oh.
I think the noise is coming from the fan of my laptop. My apology for that.
Okay.
Yeah, the fan is a bit noisy. Yeah. So next slide, please. As Megan during the DINA introduction already mentioned that one of the preliminary activities of the DINA is to develop the micronutrient and large-scale food fortification data lexicon. So why do we need that? I'm sure we don't need to argue a lot or explain a lot. Why do we need that? But if there is a discrepancy in the use of terminology in the terms related to the micronutrient programs and with more particular focus on the large-scale food fortification, if there is inconsistency in the use of terminology, then it will definitely interfere with the smooth communication among the stakeholders, as their diverse sector and the multiple stakeholders are engaging in the micronutrient programs. So the idea or the purpose of this effort is to establish a central repository of consensus definition on the terms related to the micronutrient programs with particular focus, but not limited to large-scale food fortification and their related data collection methods. It will be used in the micronutrient programs. We all acknowledge that there are already existing definitions from the existing data platforms like Global Food Fortification Data Exchange, WHO Vitamins and Minerals Food Information System. But the efforts are still needed for those definitions to be universally adopted or centrally accessible. So we believe that through the development of the micronutrient and large-scale food fortification data consensus lexicon, a set of key terms and the consensus definition will be assembled and made widely available to increase the program participation and better understanding, of course, finally, to facilitate a smoother communication with emphasis on the importance of data, meaningful for the programmatic decision making. Next slide, please. So from this data lexicon, the consensus lexicon, we hope to provide benefit for a wider range of stakeholders. Of course, those who are already engaging in the field, like policymakers, government implementers, and the researchers who are working in the field, and the private sectors, technical support agencies like GAME, Nutrition International, PAT, and so on. And other professionals and those in the adjacent sectors, as in the introduction slides already mentioned, that like economic sectors, education sectors, sanitation, and so on, not just to the health and nutrition sector. And we also hope to benefit from this lexicon to those who are very new to the field, those who want to engage or conduct research in the micronutrient fields or who want to engage in the micronutrient programs. So we believe that the lexicon will help us for better designing, implementation, planning, monitoring, and evaluation of the micronutrient and large-scale food fortification programs. Next slide, please. So this is one to share with you how we come up with the draft consensus lexicon. At first, we have identified a set of key terms on the micronutrients and large-scale food fortification programs based on the programmatic implication of those terms. So if we want to start a micronutrient program, we believe that we need to start up with the assessment of the existing situation. So we have come up with programmatic implication of assessment, planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Based on this programmatic implication, we have identified a set of key terms on micronutrient and LSFF from a variety of resources, including normative agencies like WHO, FAO, US Institute of Medicine, USAID, and implementation and technical support agency, of course, from GAIN, Nutrition International, PAC, and some of the scientific and technical literatures. From this variety of resources, we have recorded the relevant terms on the micronutrient and LSFF, and then we link up with the respective citation. Currently, we are using Harvard or the date style or referencing style, link up with the terms and the reference citation. And then we review the definition of each term from those original resources. And then for some of the terms, we have made slight modification in the original definition. For example, for some terms, the original definition is only restricted to the flour fortification or salt fortification because we use the reference from iodized salt program from the for monitoring of the fortified flour program. But we made modification or changes in the original definition so that our consensus lexicon definition can reflect or cover all food vehicles, not just restricted to the flour or salt. And then in case of the terms, which have multiple definitions across different resources, then we listed out all the original definition, and then we proposed one for the lexicon. And in some cases, we have combined more than one original definition to have better consensus definition for the lexicon. And we also apply appropriate keywords for each of the terms in the lexicon, and so that the user of the lexicon at the later stage can easily sort out or find the terms and the definition by just typing the keywords. As I already mentioned that in the very beginning, we identified the set of terms based on the programmatic implications. So we have also classified the terms based on those programmatic implications, like assessment, planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Of course, some of the terms may be eligible under more than one classification. For example, coverage or coding. In case of the term for coding, it will be included in the planning stage, planning category, as well as implementation and also monitoring and evaluation. So some of the terms will be eligible under more than one category, as well as a single keyword will also be applicable for more than one words. For example, the keyword of nutrient reference value will be eligible for more than one terms like adequate intake and tolerable upper intake level or things like that. Next slide, please. And this is how it looks, the current draft lexicon of our lexicon, how it looks like. Currently, we are preparing the lexicon in the Excel format for the ease of adding terms, revision, editing, and comments, and so on. But of course, at the final stage, the lexicon will be published in the Micronutrient Forum website in a easily user-friendly format so that the user can easily assess and sort out the terms and find out the definition. So here in this slide, as you can see, in the first column is the name of the terms, together with some of the abbreviation or acronym if relevant. And then the second column is we recorded the original definition from the respective resources. In the last column, you can see the short author date style of reference. in the lexicon, you can also see the full annotation of the reference that we have provided in the Excel file. In the third column, it's the proposed definition for the lexicon. For that case, most of the times we just use the original definition if there is no need to revise or make the changes in the original definition. And the next column is we have some note whether we have made changes or modification in the original definition. So which is just simply yes or no. And if it is yes, if we make some modification in the original definition, then we provide some short note or description why or how we have revised or made changes in the original definition, as I already mentioned, that to reflect or cover all food fortification, not just restricted to the flour or salt, something like that. Next slide, please. And in some cases, previous slide. In this slide, you can see that the average requirement, we have several different definitions across the resources. So we have provided one definition for the lexicon. Of course, in that case, we combine two resources, two references, and we combine the definition from two references and propose that definition for the lexicon. So after that, from this process, we will go on how to get the consensus on the draft lexicon. Next slide, please. So currently, after the initial round, we have come up with 115 terms in our current draft lexicon. Out of that, 54 terms have multiple definitions from different resources, and 12 terms have made the modification or changes as suggested by the DINA team. And then our next step will be to have the consensus lexicon. So we plan to seek the agreement for the terms with multiple definitions, or for those we have made changes in the original definition. We here propose to use a modified Delphi approach to get the consensus lexicon. So next slide, please. So we will go through with 2 or 3 rounds of getting consensus or feedback from the expert. So the round 1 will be with the form of online survey with the goal to engage a large panel of multidisciplinary experts in the field of micronutrients, food fortification, and other relevant expertise. So we will provide list of that 43 terms by distributing through the online survey. What we plan is we will disseminate or distribute the draft lexicon in the Micronutrient Forum newsletter, and of course with the personal contact as well. And then we will request for the respondents to grade each term which should be the prioritized or suitable to be included in the lexicon. And of course, I want to highlight here that the 115 terms in total and the 43 terms which need more focus by the expert is not limited number, it's not the final number. Based on the different perspective from the background that variety of experts are coming from, so the suggestion and comments to have more additional terms in the lexicon are also welcome, because you all come from different perspectives and different expertise areas. So we will be consider adding other terms based on the feedback and suggestion from the experts. So the respondent will grade each term and provide feedback and comments. And based on the comments and feedback, we will summarize the responses, and the terms with 75% or more agreement will be considered as the final, and the remaining terms will be considered as pending. And next slide, please. Then we will continue with, previous slide. Then we will continue with the panel of experts. We plan to conduct an invited panel of selected experts from the DINA, and then share with the panel the summary of the pending terms from the round 1. And then panelists will have to grade each term again, the pending terms from the round 1, and then provide comments and feedback on those terms. And the responses will be summarized, and those with more than 75% agreement will be considered as the final, while the others still remain as the pending. So we hope to finish by online survey and the round 2, which is expert panel, and to get the finalized comment and feedback. But if still needed, we will continue with the round 3, another expert panel following the same procedure that I've just mentioned in the round 2. So next slide, please. So after that, after those online survey, getting the feedback from the larger group of experts, and then invite a selected panel of experts, and then we will combine the responses and feedback from the expert, and we will finalize the lexicon. Again, when we say finalize the lexicon is with the current list of terms, but still we will consider this as the living document so that inputs and suggestions from the experts will always be accommodated as the living document. And then we plan to publish, as I already mentioned, that the lexicon will be published in the DINA website in a user-friendly format so that the user of the lexicon will easily sort out the terms, find out their definition, and also if they have more interest, then they can go in detail through the full citation that we will be provided. And then we will also plan to publish about the methodology of this lexicon development in a peer-reviewed journal. So with that, I'd like to end up my presentation, and thank you for your kind attention.
Great.
And
Thank you so much, Sulma.
my apology for the sound. Yeah, I don't know.
It got a lot better, so I don't know what changed, but any questions or comments for Linmar? All right. Well, hopefully in the coming weeks or so. Yes. Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, this is A. Parvanta. Just one quick question. Thank you for that presentation. I don't know if I missed it somehow, but in that list of terms, but the definition of large scale, that, you know, I kind of understand what you mean, but I'm not sure. You know, large scale is some people might consider, industrial production, large scale production in the sense that it has the relevant technology to allow for, an efficient way to fortify in a consistent way. That's kind of, and that's what the term fortifiable we came up with back in 2008 with flour fortification. So because large scale to me means it as a public health intervention, it will be implemented at large scale at the population level. So even micronutrient powders with little powder, it has to be distributed to large proportions of the population to be effective. So I don't know, or whether it's biofortification or whatever it is. So I want to know what these terms, what you mean by large scale, or does everybody understand what is meant by large scale versus industrial production, fortifiable, and there are some definitions for mechanical things versus public health intervention. Sorry, thanks.
Thanks, Avi, for your question. As I already mentioned that we don't propose a new definition, but we just review the existing definition and propose the consensus definition so that more easier understanding and also harmonization of the definition. In case of large-scale food fortification, here the original definition they provided quite different definition. That's why this is one of the terms that we propose for the expert panel to provide feedback and comment. As you already rightly mentioned that in some definition they mentioned the large scale is the production capacity, but in other definition they provide more cover, more target population. So it's quite confusing when we only stick to the one definition. So this is one of the reasons why we want to have the expert feedback and suggestion on those kind of terms so that we have more consensus definition that we can propose for the DINA as in our lexicon. Reid or Megan, if you want to add more comments, then please. Thank you.
Yeah.
Abe, I'm not sure if what your specific question was there regarding our definition of the term large scale, but I think your comments highlight the need for the lexicon, that there are terms that some of us use with a large degree of confidence, or we think we know what they mean, and it's not always clear that that's what other people believe they mean. And hopefully the lexicon, as Lewinmar said, without creating new terms, can standardize the language we use and at least give us a reference point, fully acknowledging that DINA is not a normative agency and can't mandate that everybody use our definition. We can at least offer a reference point for what large-scale food fortification should mean in this context, or how we're using it to facilitate communication.
Yeah, and I would add to that, this is exactly the kind of discussion I think we want to have through that Delphi process. So I hope that you will see or stay tuned for the link to the basically creating a form to create to collate everyone's input, and there will be a box for every single term for additional feedback and comments from those who choose to participate, and it'll be a fully open and public process. So I would invite you and everyone on the call to join, and we'll be disseminating that through the Micronutrient Forum platform, as well as the DINA as well. Any additional questions? If not, I will pass it over to Reed. We can go to the next slide to discuss the barriers and enablers of micronutrient data success. Oh, you're still muted.
Thanks, Megan. Great to follow up on that interesting work that Lewinmar is doing on the lexicon, which I think is a very tangible example of the benefit that DINA hopes to provide to the field with this work on the barriers enablers to data success, which is a little bit more research and hoping to inform the problems that DINA solves. If you could go to the next slide, please. The opportunity that DINA faces is to facilitate the maturation of the micronutrient and LSFF data ecosystem. So while there are potentially many activities that could be done to address specific problems, we think that the skills of the forum and the mandate of DINA are best suited to trying to raise up the entire ecosystem. And I think there's a question about how to do that. Specifically, how do we understand challenges across a variety of contexts that have led to and caused the persistence of the micronutrient data gap? And how do those challenges inform the DINA roadmap? Some of those challenges will be beyond DINA, but some of them will fall squarely in the mandate, and making sure that we understand them and are able to prioritize them is critical to our work. So how do we go about that? I think the answer is a variety of approaches. Of course, we started with the understanding and collective knowledge of the individuals involved in the Micronutrient Forum, including the staff who Megan has introduced at the top of this call, as well as the board and advisory council, which makes up a diverse group of subject matter experts, as well as individuals at the Gates Foundation who issued this grant and helped us develop the underpinnings of DINA. We then had conversations with stakeholders to start pressure testing our ideas, and are now in a formal stakeholder convening activity, which includes this call as well as 3 other meetings with stakeholders from across the globe to make sure we understand national priorities and get a diversity of opinions. But we also wanted to adopt a structured problem-solving approach, and for that we've chosen a root cause analysis. Before I describe what root cause analysis is, I do want to offer one caveat. If you go to the next slide, I want to be very clear that while we think it is an immature data ecosystem, that doesn't mean that the data we deal with is immature, and it certainly doesn't mean the people collecting and analyzing the data are immature. Rather, it means that the way the ecosystem operates, the way that the various actors interact with each other from a technological and other perspectives could be further strengthened to make everybody's work more easier and more effective. So if you go to the next slide, we decided that root cause analysis was an appropriate approach to identifying the problems that DINA is best suited to address. Root cause analysis was popularized by the Toyota Motor Corporation in the 1970s when they really redeveloped the way auto manufacturing works. And it's an interactive and inductive technique designed to identifying underlying causes, causal factors. And so this is a very pragmatic approach with interviews of key stakeholders. And we think it's critical that this gets built on the body of knowledge that already exists with the barriers and enablers in micronutrient data. Specifically, iZinc has done some very interesting work recently on what causes the inclusion or exclusion of status data in nationally representative surveys, biochemical status data in nationally representative surveys. I know Megan, in a previous role, has done some analysis with the Nutrition Modelers Consortium. And those efforts generally sought to develop a set of research questions and conduct a series of interviews across a variety of stakeholders, but really duplicate each interview across a variety of stakeholders. Whereas with the root cause analysis, we seek to build on those findings and really try to understand the driving factors behind those bottlenecks and do it in a more iterative process where we ask a question and then you ask why 5 times to get to the underlying causal factors of the issue. Anyone who has children or a niece or a nephew knows that asking why 5 times is perhaps human nature when you're young, and often leads to challenges for the answerer in defining exactly what's going on, but some deep insight into the causal factors. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Megan shared this briefly, but I'll expand a little bit on the areas of inquiry. You can see in bold, I've put the titles of the areas, and then in parentheses, I've included the program and data analysis stages through the DINA lexicon to make sure this is clear. So for example, we think there's a dearth of available data. That means that collection, curation, and exchange aren't always happening as we would like them to be. Not enough data is collected, and then certainly it's not always made as broadly available as it could be. I think data analysis is another area we've identified for inquiry, that when that data is available, sometimes the manner in which it's available is not does not enable analysis, and sometimes the skills or the time is not available for the data to be fully analyzed. And then finally, even if the data is collected and even if the data is analyzed, there isn't always the political will and the coordination at the national level or regional level to take action on that analysis. So the usage is not always as we would like to see it. We know that micronutrient issues are challenging to implement because unfortunately there's no Ministry of Nutrition at a national level. And so it takes an awful lot of coordination across actors and sectors to implement and to prioritize micronutrient policies and programs. And so again, we think this third area is rife for exploration. So I think we've got a survey question I'd like to put up now to understand the feedback of those in attendance on the priorities of these areas of inquiry. And then we'd like to have a conversation for the next 15 minutes. We've got some questions prompts to ask the group questions, but if there are any questions to start with on the methodology, the root cause analysis methodology, or on these areas of inquiry, we'd love to entertain them now as we put up that survey question. Thank you.
Great. So we'll give people just a minute or so to answer this question. And I think while we do that, just to sort of get the discussion started, I think we have a number of discussion points we can go through, but really ultimately what we're looking for is what DINA can do to be useful, especially at the national level. So we would really appreciate your feedback once we finish up this survey. All right, we'll give like 10 more seconds. All right, I will end the poll and share the results. Basically, the consensus for the most part is that all of the above are issues, which is kind of good to hear in a way. Also unfortunate because it's a lot of different problems, but it's pretty much exactly what we are envisioning as well. So I will pass it back to Reid and the rest of the group for any discussion or any thoughts really in general about how DINA can be more useful.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Again, I wonder if there's any questions about the root cause methodology or any feedback on these specific areas of inquiry. I'm inclined to agree with the consensus vote that there are issues in all of the above. Unfortunately, that makes it challenging to pick an entry point. And that's what we're really trying to do with these areas of inquiry, to sort of narrow down so we can ask good questions and arrive at more actionable insight than if we're trying to address everything all at once. Any opinion on the priorities we should start with between the availability of data versus its analysis, or the transition from that analysis to use at national level?
And this is Dave Parvanta, if I could make a comment. And
Please.
sorry, on your questionnaire, the only choice was to put that choose all, because we didn't give you options for choosing, let's say, two others instead of all. But I think one of the comments I have is that I think the idea of not using enough of the data that's already available, and I think too much focus on the health-related data. So Ministry of Health-related data sources than all other sources of data within the public sector as well as within the private sector that might be available. And I don't think we do enough of that. And then linking the data and triangulating. I think the other thing that we don't do enough is triangulating information among the different sources of data. A lot of the surveys, basically, they give you some kind of a coverage estimate and then some sort of a prevalence estimate of some whatever micronutrient status, but they don't tell you, and that's a point in time type of assessment. It doesn't tell you exactly how the program is functioning as a whole and how the program implementation relates to what we're seeing as the outcome, if you will. And that it's it's not kind of a, as I say, a holistic approach. It's kind of a very piecemeal, and I think there are a lot of other data that we just haven't utilized, and it's sitting there and we just don't use them.
Abe, why do you think it is that data exists but are being underutilized?
I'm not 100% sure, but I can tell you, at least from the health sector side, let's say, I can tell you, for example, that just one example, the data on neural tube defects is available in maternity hospitals or where babies are born in the countries, but that is not a reportable condition in most countries. So and that could be easily incorporated into an HMIS, for example, that is something like that, or data on production one of the and I've had this conversation a number of times with our friends at USAID. That in the US, for example, also we don't have data on what was the actual coverage that we reached in the United States with regard to the folic acid once the folic acid fortification was implemented. We saw the improvements in folic status, we saw the reductions in neural tube defects, but nobody ever reported what was the actual coverage of folic acid fortification, if you will, of the cereal products. We don't have that, and so and then the other issue comes. How much of a coverage do you need to reach in order to show a certain level of impact? Is it 80%? Is it 90%? As the iodine colleagues talk, or what we use in the 40 months methodology that we do, at CDC, we came up with the idea of 80%. So these are the kinds of things that we don't put the information in a holistic way to kind of, I don't know if I was able to get my point across properly, but data from other sectors of government, we should put in multiple sources of information together and look at them in a complementary way and see if they all point in the same direction or not.
Saskia?
Yes, thanks, Abe. If I understand you correctly, and in that case, I would fully agree with you. You're suggesting that we should make better use of data, or do maybe some data mining exercises to to make use of the available data that's out there, trying to find some of these associations that you were referring to. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And what I mean is that there's data sitting there. It's not, so it's really accessing that data.
Yes.
Rather than, going collecting new data, if you will, necessarily always.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we had somehow anticipated that under the second bullet point, data analysis, make better use of existing data, but I think it might be good to highlight that separately, because I do agree that it has come up in the discussions last week as well, and in some other discussions as well.
Yeah, I think this is really a factor of curation and exchange.
Yes.
I really take your point that it needs to be pulled from other sectors as well.
Yeah.
That's the key part, yes.
Any other thoughts on barriers and enablers of micronutrient data ecosystem? Or
Okay, maybe
any challenges?
I would want to contribute maybe. If I'm looking at maybe from our country, in most cases, you actually find out that we have various programs that are informed particularly by international guidelines in terms of for prevention of micronutrient deficiencies. You might be looking at supplementation such as vitamin A supplementation, and as well as food fortification. But however, when it comes to the data, I think it becomes very difficult to collect the data to monitor whether we as these programs are having an impact. In most cases, is the issue of the capacity to have that data. For example, you may actually find out that we may not have adequate resources to collect the data on micronutrient deficiencies. Or at times it might even the capacity to analyze the data itself once it's collected. And in terms of maybe the equipment and so forth. So as a result, you may actually find out that data is collected too wide apart. You may actually have 10 years without really having that data. Yes, you may have data on the coverages and so forth, but in terms of whether it is having any impact, are we seeing any improvement in the micronutrient prevalences amongst the population? That one, while we have really nothing, we would end up having really nothing because of the capacities. So in other words, what might be required, I think, we require simpler methodologies or low-cost methodologies for a collection of such data. So I think if there is that innovation of coming with something which is low cost, I think it will be quite helpful. Thank you, and over.
Yeah. So what I think I'm hearing from that is really the effect of the cost, and then also the frequency, or how frequent do you actually monitor these to make sure that the interventions are having an impact. And potentially if we had cheaper or easier methods to understand the health implications of an intervention, that might be useful. Am I hearing that correctly, hopefully?
I think that was, sorry, this is A. Parvanta. I think I thought that's what I heard the same from the colleague, and that was really a point I wanted to make as well. I don't know what kind of funding, I know that the Gates Foundation is doing a lot also supporting kind of technologies and so on, but I think from what I understand, and I'm not sure if I'm correct, that a lot of that relates to data transfer and, using tablets and whatnot, to numbers and figures, if you will, just transferring numbers and figures and to allow for analysis. But I think if I understood my colleague a moment ago who spoke, I think one of the issues is the ability to assess micronutrient status in the field. One of the biggest problems is the lack of, you can't send everything to a big lab. Most countries don't have labs. We need field technologies, if you will, more like the HemaQ type devices, but for other nutrients, if you will, or a multi-nutrient analyzer that's field-based friendly. I think that's maybe what my colleague was referring to, but that is certainly a need. But I don't know if that is your mandate to support that type of effort or work, but that's something I don't think we've done enough work with to develop that type of technology.
So this is an area that the forum has explored previously. We all wish there was more biochemical status data, and under the leadership of Ken Brown, the forum put together a report on the issues preventing more status data and made, I think, 9 recommendations for how to improve that collection. Some of them, however, are extremely large, including regional reference labs and potentially having a global fund that could help fund some of the analysis and also promote the sharing of data. So we're working now to try to actualize some of the earlier steps of that recommendation. And that includes looking at the existing technology, whether it be Quansus or a TPP that the forum participated in creating, a technical product profile for what else might be useful in the field. Although, as we all have, I think you have referenced, there's issues with cold chain and the count and location of labs that can do this analysis. There are some very challenging sort of existential issues. That is something that the forum's addressing. I think it is something that the Gates Foundation remains interested in, but that seems like a medium and long-term issue that is part of DINA, but I'm not sure we expect any immediate action on. But there's another way of addressing this, which is interesting. So rather than, or in addition to just trying to reduce the cost and complexity of collecting data, I think we also need to increase the motivation to collect data. And an interesting observation and suggestion came up in a recent meeting. The observation is that the existence of micronutrient programs facilitate the collection of data. If countries have programs on certain nutrients, those nutrients are more likely to be included in nationally representative health surveys. And so one suggestion was to create guidelines that even in the absence of biochemical status data, we can still have some methodology to determine the likely prevalence of deficiency, and to have some not normative, but guidelines presented by DINA on behalf of the community that would suggest programs that can be developed based on the apparent prevalence of deficiency. And the existence of those programs would be likely to facilitate the collection of data in future years to help that be prioritized. So it's a little bit of chicken and egg versus egg and chicken onto how to create more programs that are impactful and how to make sure we're measuring those to understand the prevalence of deficiency and the impact of those programs. I'm wondering if there's any reflections from this group here about how effective sort of the opposite approach would be at the national level of proposing the creation of programs and then the measurement of those programs.
I think one of the things we're also trying to piece together as part of some of the early activities are case studies of where data has really been used quite well to advocate for either a policy change or a programmatic change. And one of the pieces of this would really be to demonstrate the cost effectiveness of having the data. So, if the survey was done, it's expensive, but it could also lead to cost savings in terms of understanding the impact of the interventions and how they're actually done and carried out as well. So that's one way we're thinking of doing advocacy at that level. Winmar, please go ahead.
Thank you, Megan. I just want to support the idea that we proposed chicken and egg or chicken, whatever, but the existence of some micronutrient programs will still be useful motivating factor for having the updated data, because when we are implementing the programs, we need to know whether we are going on the right track, on the right direction, or whether deviating from our target. Then it will be one of the best way to motivate our policymakers and the implementers to review our program, not necessarily implementing a new program, of course, but we need to see whether we are going on the right way. So it will be one of the best motivating factors for having the existing micronutrient programs. This is how we apply in some of the countries. Yeah, just want to share my thought that. And another cost issue, I think one of the suggestions in this morning meeting was, of course, we all acknowledge that the expensive of the including the micronutrient biochemical data, but one suggestion is that whenever we conduct the health and nutrition survey, we should include the micronutrient status data, but not all the sample size, but the sub-sample size as well. And some advancing methodology using very few amount of blood samples with very minimal cost are also one of the opportunities that we can make use of to solve these barriers. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's also another important point, is to kind of piggyback whenever possible. And that's one of the other groups we're engaging with is DHS, to see if there's a better way to work those surveys with micronutrient biomarker collection as well, hopefully to streamline that. Any other thoughts or comments from the group on this particular topic or anything that we've discussed so far? All right, if not, I think it would be great to go to the last slide. And I would just like to remind you all to hopefully join us as members so that you can stay connected to the projects that we're working on, and one more slide. There we go. This has all of our contact details on it, but I really do want to thank you all for joining us and for participating. I hope you found it at least interesting and informative, and you'll join us as members of DINA. The application was at the beginning of the chat as well. And if you do have any feedback, please do email us. You can email the info@micronutrient forum here, or dina@micronutrientforum.org, and that'll come to me directly if you do have additional thoughts on any of the things that we discussed, or if you think of something later. Please do feel free to reach out. We'll be taking feedback for quite a long period here to try and work out the activities of DINA. So we very much look forward to engaging with you in the future. And I really thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.